I had always loved New Year's Eve. It was a night of promises, endings, and beginnings. When the invitation to the Silverpine Manor Masquerade Ball arrived, I was thrilled. The manor, an architectural relic, was the heart of all extravagant celebrations in our town. The night was crisp, the stars like shards of ice in the sky. Silverpine loomed, its towers piercing the night. A sense of unease fluttered in my stomach as I approached the grand doors, a feeling I attributed to the excitement. The ballroom was a tapestry of colors and music. Masks hid the identities of the guests, adding mystery and intrigue to the air. Laughter and chatter drowned the occasional creaks and groans of the old manor. Our host, Mr. Alistair, was a peculiar figure. His mask was an intricate clock face, its hands nearing midnight, but never quite reaching it. He welcomed us with a voice that echoed strangely, as if from far away. As the evening wore on, the hands of the clocks around the manor seemed to slow. Guests glanced at their watches, but time itself appeared to be holding its breath. The anticipation for the midnight countdown grew into a tangible restlessness. Seeking a moment of quiet, I stumbled upon a hidden room behind a tapestry. It was filled with clocks, hundreds of them, all frozen a minute before midnight. And there, in the center of the room, stood a life-sized clockwork figure, its face identical to Mr. Alistair's mask. Returning to the ballroom, I found it less crowded. A guest mentioned people had begun to vanish, one by one, as the minute hand of their watch neared 12. Panic hadn't set in yet. After all, it was a night for tricks and games. I confronted Mr. Alistair, demanding to know where the guests had gone. His only response was a chilling smile as he gestured to the clocks. "Time is the threshold between worlds," he said. "And tonight, the barrier is thin." The ballroom began to change. The walls aged and decayed before our eyes. Guests faded, their laughter turning to echoes. The manor itself seemed to unravel in the fabric of time. I ran, the manor a labyrinth of distortion. Behind me, the chimes of clocks began to ring, though none had worked before. The sound was a dirge, a funeral march for the year that would never be born. I found myself in the clockwork room again, the hands of all the clocks moving now, racing to complete the year. The clockwork figure turned to me, its mechanical heart beating a countdown to my doom. As the hands aligned, a blinding light filled the room. I felt myself pulled across an unseen threshold. When my vision cleared, I was outside, the manor nothing but ruins in the light of the first sunrise of the year. The town awoke to find Silverpine Manor had vanished, along with all its guests. Only I remained, a sole witness to the new year that never came, and the guests trapped in a moment lost to time. In the days that followed, Silverpine Manor became a legend, a ghost story whispered in the chill of winter. I tried to tell my story, but it was too outlandish, too unbelievable. I alone remembered the faces that had vanished with the manor. Nights became a gauntlet of terror. In dreams, I wandered through endless halls of the manor, hearing the laughter and music of the ball, always just out of reach. I'd wake to the sound of phantom clock chimes, a reminder of the time that had stolen so much. Driven by a need for closure, I began my own investigation into the manor's history. I unearthed tales of Alistair's ancestors, a lineage shadowed by rumors of time experiments and dealings with forbidden arts. In the town's archives, I found a diary belonging to Alistair's great-grandfather. It spoke of a temporal well, a family secret capable of bending the fabric of time, but at a terrible cost. 1 year later, as the anniversary of that fateful night approached, I felt an inexorable pull back to the ruins of Silverpine. Compelled by an unseen force, I stood amidst the decay, the air thick with the anticipation of a reckoning. As the clock in the town square struck midnight, a chilling wind swept through the ruins. There, in the moonlight, stood the spectral figures of the lost guests, their eyes pleading, trapped in an eternal masquerade. The diary had mentioned a ritual, one last desperate chance to undo the temporal lock. With trembling hands, I set the ancient symbols, reciting words that felt as old as time itself. The ground shook as a rift in time opened. The ghosts of Silverpine, bound for so long, drifted towards the rift, their whispers a chorus of gratitude and sorrow. As the last of the spirits disappeared, Alistair's ghostly form emerged. "Join us," he beckoned, "and witness eternity." Temptation gnawed at me, but I knew this was a journey from which there was no return. With a heavy heart I declined, sealing the rift. Alistair and the manor faded into legend, leaving me in a world that had moved on without them. Now I stand as the keeper of memories, the guardian of a night that the world has forgotten. Each New Year's Eve, I light a candle for the souls of Silverpine, a beacon for those lost in the shadows of time. The manor is gone, but its echo lingers in my mind, a reminder that time is a river that flows both ways. And sometimes, in the quiet moments before midnight, I wonder what might have been if I had stepped through the rift into the unknown embrace of eternity. In the deepest archives of the city library, hidden within ancient tomes, I discovered a forgotten prophecy about a New Year's Eve unlike any other. It spoke of a shadow that would fall over the world on January 1st, swallowing everything in its path. As December waned, strange occurrences began to unsettle the city. Pets went missing, shadows seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally, and a perpetual chill filled the air. People joked about the end of days, unaware of how close to the truth they were. I dove deeper into the prophecy, driven by a morbid curiosity and growing fear. It spoke of the first night, a phenomenon that occurred once every millennium, where the barriers between worlds grew thin, allowing something ancient and dark to seep through. I tried to warn others, but my words were met with skepticism and ridicule. After all, prophecies were the stuff of fantasy, not modern life. But as New Year's Eve approached, an uneasy tension gripped the city. On December 31st, a heavy fog descended upon us. The city lights dimmed, and an oppressive darkness began to creep into every corner, every home. People huddled together, waiting for the clock to strike midnight, hoping it would all be a bad dream. But as the countdown began, a silence fell over the city. The usual cheers were absent. When midnight struck, it wasn't the start of a new year that we witnessed, but the birth of an endless night. The darkness outside was alive, moving like a living thing. It pressed against the windows and seeped through cracks, extinguishing lights and fires. The cold it brought was not of this world. One by one, people began to vanish. First, those outside, then those near windows and doors. They were there one moment and gone the next, taken by the shadow. I barricaded myself in my home, sealing every entrance with light and fire. But even then, I could feel the darkness probing, testing, seeking a way in. In the depths of the night, voices whispered from the other side of my walls. They were soft, enticing, promising an end to fear and pain if only I would step into the dark. The temptation was maddening. Every instinct in me screamed to stay away from the dark, but the voices were persuasive, playing on my deepest desires and fears. I expected sunrise to bring relief, but the sun never rose. The darkness remained, a curtain over the world. Time lost meaning, and with it, hope began to wither. I scoured the ancient texts for a way to reverse the first night. The prophecy spoke of a heart of darkness, the source of the shadow hidden within the city. Armed with this knowledge, I ventured into the dark. The city was unrecognizable, twisted by the shadow into a labyrinth of fear. The air was thick with whispers and unseen movements. After what felt like an eternity, I found it. A pulsing blackness in the city's heart. A tear in the fabric of reality. Around it, the air shimmered with a spectral light, the boundary between our world and the one beyond. The texts hinted at a sacrifice, a life willingly given to close the tears. My heart pounded at the realization. I was the only one left to make that choice. As I approached the heart, the darkness writhed in anticipation. The voices crescendoed into a deafening roar, promising eternal darkness or a return to light, depending on my choice. With a final look at the shadowy ruins of my world, I stepped forward, offering myself to the heart. The darkness enveloped me, cold and absolute. From within the void, I felt a release, a shattering of the shadow as light burst forth, tearing through the darkness. The last thing I saw was the city, bathed in the golden light of a long-awaited dawn. They say the city was reborn that day, emerging from an eternal night into a new beginning. But the cost was great, and the hero who made it possible was never seen again. In the aftermath, the city slowly awoke from its nightmare. The sun rose, casting light on streets once shrouded in darkness. People emerged, blinking in disbelief, their memories of the night fragmented, like a dream fading at dawn. Stories spread of a night that lasted forever and a hero who vanished into the dark to save the world. But with no name or face to remember, I became a legend, my sacrifice a tale told to children. Though the light returned, a shadow lingered in the hearts of those who survived. The city rebuilt, but in the quiet moments, when the sun dipped below the horizon, an unspoken fear gripped the souls of the people. Laura, a friend and fellow journalist who had been with me that night, dedicated her life to uncovering the truth. She searched for me, hoping to find a clue to my fate, but all she found were whispers and shadows. I watched from beyond, a specter in a world I saved. I saw Laura's relentless pursuit and her guilt for not being the one to step into the dark. I wanted to reach out, to tell her it was okay, but I was just a wisp of memory, intangible and voiceless. The city changed as the years passed. Buildings grew taller, lights brighter, but the shadow of that New Year's Eve was etched into the architecture, a monument to the darkness that once was. Every New Year's Eve, Laura held a vigil. She stood in the heart of the city, a lone figure against the backdrop of celebration, her candle a beacon for the hero lost to the shadow. In the realm where I dwelled, time was a fractured thing. I saw the world in fragments, pieces of lives and moments floating in the eternal night. I was a watcher, bound to the shadow I had conquered. One day, in the depths of the broken time, I stumbled upon a new prophecy. It spoke of a second darkness, one that would come unless the hero returned to mend the tear completely. The revelation shook me. I had to warn Laura, the city, the world. But how? I was a ghost, a memory. In desperation, I reached into the fractured time, sending visions to Laura, hoping she would understand. Laura's dreams were haunted by images of a looming darkness and a sense of urgency. She pieced together the fragments, her determination turning into resolve. The texts spoke of a ritual, a way to bring a soul back from the shadow. It required a bond, one strong enough to bridge worlds. Laura knew what she had to do. On the anniversary of that fateful New Year's Eve, Laura stood in the city's heart, the ritual laid before her. She called to me, her voice a beacon piercing through the realms. I felt the pull, a tether to the world I had left. With every ounce of my being, I reached toward her voice, toward the light. And then I was there, in the flesh, standing before Laura in a world that had moved on without me. Our reunion was a moment of tears and joy, a testament to the unbreakable human spirit. But our celebration was short-lived. The second darkness was upon us, a storm brewing on the horizon, threatening to engulf the world once more. Together, Laura and I faced a new threat, armed with knowledge and a bond that transcended realms. The battle was fierce, the darkness hungry and relentless. In the heart of the storm, I found the tear in reality. With Laura's help, I sealed it, not with a sacrifice, but with a promise of hope and light. As the tear closed, the darkness receded, and a new day dawned. The world was saved, not by one hero, but by the unity of two. We became guardians of the light, keepers of the day. Our story, a tale of darkness and light, of sacrifice and reunion, was etched into the annals of history, a beacon for future generations. They say every city has its dark secrets, and mine was no different. As a journalist, I was always on the hunt for the obscure and the bizarre. That's how I stumbled upon the legend of the Final Countdown, a curse that struck every New Year's Eve, claiming one soul as the clock struck midnight. The city was abuzz with excitement as New Year's Eve approached. Parties were planned and streets were decorated. But beneath the festive veneer, a palpable dread lingered. I decided to dig deeper, to uncover the truth behind the curse. My investigation led me to Mrs. Calloway, an old woman whose husband was the curse's first recorded victim decades ago. In her dimly lit living room, she recounted the tale. Her husband had vanished into thin air at the stroke of midnight, leaving behind only a chilling echo of his last scream. As I delved into the archives, a pattern emerged. Every year, without fail, someone disappeared at midnight on New Year's Eve. The victims were random. No age, gender, or background connected them. 2 days before the new year, a mysterious letter arrived at my office. It was a warning predicting the next victim. The name written was someone I knew, Laura, a fellow journalist and a skeptic of the curse. I rushed to warn Laura, but she laughed it off. "It's just a legend," she said. But her laughter didn't reach her eyes, which flickered with an unspoken fear. New Year's Eve arrived, cloaked in a festive yet ominous atmosphere. I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom as I attended the city's main celebration, where Laura was reporting live. As midnight approached, the crowd's cheer turned to a collective, anxious breath-holding. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. My heart raced. 7, 6, 5. I scanned the crowd for Laura. 4, 3, 2. At 1, the world seemed to stand still. Then a scream pierced the night. Laura's scream. I spun around only to see her being swallowed by a shadow that emerged from the very ground. Then she was gone. Chaos ensued. People ran, some crying, some screaming. The curse had claimed its latest victim, and I had witnessed it. No one believed my story. The official report stated Laura had simply disappeared, another unsolved case. But I knew the truth, a truth too terrifying to accept. The curse became my obsession. I spent the year poring over every detail, every account. I had to break the cycle, to save the next victim. As the next New Year's Eve approached, no letter came, no prediction. The city, unaware of the looming shadow, prepared to celebrate. I felt a dread unlike any other. Without a name, how could I save them? I stood in the heart of the celebration, eyes darting across the crowd. Midnight approached, and the air grew colder, charged with an unseen menace. Then, in a moment of chilling clarity, I understood. The curse wasn't just taking people, it was feeding on the fear, the anticipation. We were all part of it, part of this dark ritual. The countdown began. This time, I felt a pull, a calling. The curse was not just a taker of souls. It was a collector of stories, and I had become part of its narrative. I had a choice to make, to let the curse claim another or to offer myself, to become the story I had so desperately sought to understand. As the crowd chanted the final numbers, I stepped forward, accepting my fate. The shadow emerged, a gaping maw of darkness. In my last breath, I whispered my story, my truth, into the abyss. The shadow enveloped me, and I felt myself falling into the void. They say every city has its dark secrets. Mine was the final countdown, a story that I became a part of. And as the new year dawns, I whisper this tale from the shadows, a warning and a plea to remember those who vanished at the stroke of midnight.